He asked one question every American has been waiting to hear answered. Who else did Epstein traffic those young women to? The room froze, the air went heavy, and in that silence the mask slipped, not just from Patel but from an entire system that's been hiding behind polished phrases and sealed files for decades. Because when Patel said there's no credible information that he trafficked anyone else, what he really said was the truth is too dangerous to name. For years victims have testified, flight logs exist, settlements were paid, and yet somehow the official story remains that Epstein's crimes began and ended with him alone.
State court judge, do you get to decide you don't want to follow federal law?
No.
And if you violate federal law, you get arrested, don't you?
Yes, Senator.
That's called equal treatment under the law, isn't it?
Yes, Senator.
You remember Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, don't you?
Yes, Senator.
Mr. Strzok worked for the FBI. Mr. Strzok worked for the FBI. I think Ms. Page worked for Justice. The Inspector General found in its investigation that they hated President Trump and they really wanted Secretary Clinton to win. Is that true?
That's correct, sir.
And this would be the same same Ms. Page who sent an email to Mr. Strzok with whom she was having an affair. Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right? And Mr. Strzok with the FBI, senior official at the FBI replied, quote, no, he won't. We'll stop it. Did I read that correctly?
You did, Senator.
Okay. Now, Ms. Page quit before she could get fired. Mr. Strzok was fired. And predictably, they filed a lawsuit because in Washington, it's easier to divorce your spouse than it is to fire a federal employee. Why did the FBI give Mr. Strzok $1.2 million and Ms. Page $800,000 to settle a lawsuit?
Senator, I do not know that settlement was reached in the prior administration.
Who made the decision?
The prior Department of Justice.
Who in the prior Department of Justice?
The settlement for that kind of case can only come from the Attorney General, which would be Attorney General Merrick Garland.
So the Attorney General decided to give Mr. Strzok $1.2 million and Ms. Page $800,000 after they were fired after actively interfering in the 2016 election. Is that right?
My understanding is that was a settlement they agreed to.
Pass me the sick bucket, please. The Hunter Biden laptop. In October of 2016, shortly before the election, the New York Post wrote a story that was widely covered talking about Mr. Hunter Biden's influence peddling scheme based on his laptop. A couple of weeks later, Secretary of State, soon to be Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, organized a group of 51 so-called intelligence experts. Had some real rock stars on the list. Jim Clapper, John Brennan, Michael Hayden, Leon Panetta, and they said, oh, no, this story in the New York Post is not true. It's based on Russian disinformation. You remember that?
I do, Senator, as the lead investigator for Russiagate for the House Intel Committee.
Yeah. The FBI had the laptop for 10 months, hadn't they?
They did, Senator.
So the FBI knew right before the election that it wasn't Russian disinformation, didn't they?
And that was confirmed by the Inspector General's report.
Yeah. Who at the FBI refused to let the FBI tell the American people the truth?
I don't have that name in front of me, sir.
Well, would you look?
I will, sir.
I'd like to know. I'd like a name, not a division. I'd like the name. Person with a brain and a beating heart.
Yes, sir.
Did Jeffrey Epstein hang himself or did somebody kill him?
Senator, I believe he hung himself in a cell in the Metropolitan Detention Center.
Are you going to release all the information about that?
Senator, we are working through that right now with the Department of Justice.
When do you think you'll have it done, Cash?
I think in the near future, sir.
Like before I die?
Senator, we've been working on that, and we're doing it in a way that protects victims and also doesn't put out into the ether information that is irrelevant for production of the public, such as CSAM.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Reid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director. As you're well aware, DOJ.
It's a narrative so neat, so surgically clean, it could only survive inside a bureaucracy built to bury the inconvenient. But Senator John Kennedy wasn't buying it. He asked again, who else? And that moment cracked open a window most Americans never get to look through. Because when power is questioned under oath, you can feel the panic between the lines. You can see the careful words. You can hear the fear of saying too much. And that's where this story really begins. Kash Patel sat there stone-faced saying he'd reviewed a good amount of the Epstein files. That phrase alone should chill you. Not all of them, not thoroughly examined, just a good amount. Then came the dodge. There is no credible information that Epstein trafficked anyone else. No credible information. That single phrase is Washington's favorite shield. It doesn't mean the evidence isn't there. It means someone decided it doesn't count. It means the names, the flights, the transactions, the witnesses were quietly stamped not credible and shelved. Because credible in politics doesn't mean true. It means safe to admit. And when the truth isn't safe, it gets buried alive. None of this started with Kash Patel or even with Jeffrey Epstein's arrest. It started in 2007, when federal prosecutors under Alexander Acosta struck a deal so bizarre, it still defies belief. Epstein pleaded guilty to minor charges in Florida. He served time in a local jail, on weekends, allowed to work from an office 6 days a week. The FBI's full case, hundreds of pages of victim testimony, evidence leads, was silenced under what's now known as the non-prosecution agreement. That deal didn't just protect Epstein, it protected everyone around him. It was in effect a blanket immunity for the unnamed powerful. And that's the origin of the rot Patel was dancing around. From 2008 onward, every administration inherited those sealed files. Obama's DOJ didn't touch them. Trump's DOJ reopened them, but only to recharge Epstein himself. Biden's DOJ continues to say its hands are tied by court orders. Different presidents, same silence, because this isn't about left or right, it's about up and down. Power versus accountability. When Senator Kennedy pressed Patel, "Will you release all of them?" Patel replied that the department would release as much as legally permitted. And that's the legal magic trick, as much as legally permitted. The problem is, the same institutions that claim their hands are tied are the ones that built the knots. Court orders don't fall from the sky. They were filed, argued, and defended by government lawyers by the same agencies now claiming innocence. The FBI, the DOJ, the Southern District, all played a part in limiting the scope, protecting the names, redacting the records. And when they tell you those redactions protect victims, remember this, they're protecting the identities of the powerful too. Patel says only the Trump administration courageously reopened the case, but reopening without full exposure isn't courage, it's containment. Because Epstein didn't operate in a vacuum, he built an entire infrastructure of abuse, planes, private islands, financial networks, all designed to serve people with power, money, and secrets to lose. The idea that he did it all for himself defies logic. You don't traffic dozens of young women, fly them across borders, and build a guest list of billionaires for your own amusement. You build that empire for clientele, for leverage, for silence. But every time the question comes up, who else, we get the same answer. No credible information, and here's what that phrase really hides, a pattern of selective credibility. When an ordinary citizen is accused, the government leaks every detail. Names, photos, messages, bank records. When a billionaire is accused, the files suddenly become sensitive. When a senator's donor appears on the flight log, the evidence becomes ongoing. And when a CEO's name is whispered by a victim, the victim becomes not reliable. That's how truth dies, not from absence, but from classification. The American people aren't asking for gossip. They're asking for transparency. They already know Epstein was a predator. They know he trafficked young women. What they want to know is who else. And that's the question every administration has ducked for almost 20 years. Patel didn't deny there were other names. He didn't deny that records exist. He simply said we've released all credible information. That word credible is doing all the heavy lifting. Credibility in the language of institutions is a moving target. It's a reason to close a case. It's an excuse to redact. It's the line they draw between what the public deserves to know and what they'd rather we didn't. And every time that line is drawn, it protects someone. When whistleblowers leak military documents, the government says transparency endangers national security. When journalists uncover corruption, they're accused of disinformation. But when a case like Epstein's threatens to expose who really has power in America, the word credible suddenly means nothing will ever see daylight. So yes, Senator Kennedy's question hit a nerve, because it cornered Patel into admitting what many already suspected, that the Epstein files are being filtered not by truth, but by politics. Patel reminded the room that Epstein's lenient deal, his weekend jail, his years of unchecked access were all system failures. But that's only half the truth. Systems don't fail like that by accident. They fail by design. Somebody had to approve those limits. Somebody had to look the other way. Somebody had to decide that public outrage was less dangerous than public knowledge. And that's why this story isn't really about Jeffrey Epstein anymore. It's about the system that built him, and still protects his ghost. The deeper tragedy is that the victims still live with the scars, while their abusers live with anonymity. They told their stories again and again, often at great personal cost, and each time the response was the same. We can't release that, we can't confirm that, it's not credible. Justice delayed became justice denied. So when Patel says we'll release everything we're legally permitted to, remember those laws were written by the same class of people who socialized with Epstein at parties and fundraisers. When the fox writes the rules for the henhouse, you don't get justice, you get procedure. That's why this exchange between Kennedy and Patel matters more than it seems, because it exposes the quiet machinery of secrecy. It shows how power launders its own sins. It reveals that even in 2025, the most notorious predator in modern history still has a system guarding his secrets. And the irony, the files exist, they could be released tomorrow. But the government fears the fallout more than it respects the truth. So where does that leave us? With a question that still echoes unanswered: who else? And maybe the scarier thought is that they already know, because if names came out, if records showed who funded what, who flew where, who paid whom, the consequences would ripple through politics, finance, entertainment, and diplomacy. Entire legacies would collapse, so they stall, they redact, they review a good amount, and while they do, justice stays stuck in the same holding pattern it's been in since 2008. But here's what's different now. People aren't buying the silence anymore. Every time officials use phrases like "no credible information," millions of ordinary citizens hear "we don't trust you with the truth." And that distrust, earned built over years, has become the real threat to the system. Because once the public stops believing in institutional honesty, those institutions lose their authority. And maybe that's why the Epstein files are so feared, not because of what they prove, but because of what their release would expose about the system itself. Senator Kennedy said it best: this issue isn't going away. He's right, not because of partisanship, not because of scandal, but because at some point, truth stops being a luxury and becomes a demand. Americans don't want redacted justice, they want reality. They want to know if their government serves the people or protects the powerful. And so we end where it began, with one simple question that refuses to die: who else? Until those names are known, every courtroom statement, every press release, every "we've done all we can," will sound hollow. Because justice without truth isn't justice at all. If you believe the Epstein files should be released in full, without filters, without excuses, without political editing, then don't just watch. Be part of the pressure. Subscribe, share this story, and comment what you think the public deserves to see. Because this channel exists to do what others won't, to dig, to question, to confront the powerful silence head on. And as long as those files stay hidden, we'll keep asking the same question until someone finally answers it. Who else was Epstein protecting, and who's protecting them now? Like the video, subscribe for updates, and stay with us, because this story, this truth, isn't over yet.